What's happening, everybody? It is our official SEC prediction show for 2024. What do we have your school doing this year? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We're going to give you our predictions on how we think the SEC is going to shape up this year, and you're either going to love us or hate us for our predictions. But, hey, we do it every year. We make our predictions. We stand by them, so we'll do that here on Locked On SEC. But I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, before we get to our season predictions on how we think everything's going to shape up for SEC teams, we need to get to some SEC news because we had some news yesterday. So we dive right into it as over at Georgia, Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. They are ready to get underway this Saturday as they take on the Clemson Tigers. But running back Trevor Etienne, who transferred in from Florida, expected to be a big-time contributor this year, his status is up in the air this weekend. It's not that he's not healthy, it's that he had an off-field situation in the offseason. Back in March, he was charged with a DUI, but the case was ultimately pled down and resolved back in July. When asked about Trevor Etienne's outlook for Saturday by the media, Kirby Smart said, "I don't really talk about any of the other stuff in regards to any of our players with suspensions." Later on in the session, he was asked just about Etienne's status, but also Smile London, Sokovie White, and he again declined to elaborate on that. So here's the situation. We know Trevor Etienne's expected to be a starter. Then they have Nate Frazier, Branson Robinson, Cash Jones, and then behind them, Chauncey Bowens and Dwight Phillips. Now, Roderick Robinson, he is out, or expected to be out with a toe. So, going to be interested to see. So, Roderick Robinson, unlikely to play with the toe injury. Etienne is healthy, but wondering if they're going to suspend him due to the offseason rest. And if neither Etienne or Robinson play, look for Nate Frazier and Branson Robinson to pick up the carries. Expect Cash Jones as well, but he'll probably primarily be used on passing down. So it's a big game against Clemson. It's not exactly like Georgia's opening with, State U West. So it's one where they're going to have to be productive running the football, but they've recruited well there. They're deep at the position, so you expect somebody to emerge. But some unprovens there, right? It's not a lot of proven guys behind Trevor Etienne, but certainly something to keep a track of and a watch on heading into this weekend. All right, over at Vanderbilt, we mentioned on the show yesterday, Clark Lee still has not officially announced a starter, but late Sunday night, Diego Pavia was among the 5 captains named by the Vanderbilt football team. So if you take that for what it's worth, he is likely to be the starting quarterback. Alongside Pavia, it was safety Marlon Sewell, linebacker Langston Patterson, and safety C.J. Taylor, as well as wide receiver Richie Hoskins, all named as captains. Now, Pavia earned the captain nod his first year transferring in from New Mexico State, and he's the heavy favorite to be the starting quarterback. But, again, no starter has still officially been named to this point. They play Virginia Tech this weekend, by the way. But obviously Pavia, known by most SEC fans, as leading that upset of Auburn last year under the guidance of Jerry Kill and Tim Beck. And now Kill and Beck are both on Vanderbilt's staff. So if you read between the lines here, it's likely going to be his job with Nate Johnson, the other guy in the mix, to transfer from Utah. But Vanderbilt will open the season Saturday against Virginia Tech, 11 a.m. Central, 12 Eastern on ESPN at First Bank Stadium. Over Texas, interesting questions being asked to Steve Sarkisian on Monday, and he was asked whether or not Arch Manning will see the field in the first half this week against Colorado State. He simply said, "We'll find out." Kind of a weird question. I would have said, "Coach, do you expect us to see Arch Manning at all this week?" right? Because Quinn Ewers is the starter. And it's not a quarterback controversy, but, I mean, maybe you create one if Sark runs Arch out there for a series or two in the first half, right? Like, you expect basically Quinn Ewers to start, the Longhorns to get up big, get like a 28-7 lead at halftime, and then turn the gas on in the second half, and then, maybe late third quarter, early fourth, you send in Arch Manning, you run the clock, you get out with a win. I don't know. Interesting response there from Sark on Arch Manning. We'll definitely keep an eye on that game this weekend and see if Arch gets in the first half. Over at Alabama, they are getting ready for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers coming to town, and a familiar face at starting quarterback for WKU. It is TJ Finley. The head coach, Tyson Helton, announcing on Monday that TJ Finley will, quote, run out there first against the Crimson Tide on Saturday. Of course, Finley started his career at LSU, played at Auburn, and played at Texas State last year. He's a friend of the show. We've had TJ Finley on Locked On SEC a couple times over the years, and wish him the best of luck. But, man, he's going to need it against Alabama this weekend. But, worth noting, he was part of that team that nearly, had a chance to beat Alabama 2 years ago under Brian Harsin. And, we'll see. We'll see what happens with TJ Finley, how he plays against Alabama. Also on Monday, Alabama OC Nick Sheridan met with the media and was talking about the Alabama offensive line. He was asked about the battle at starting right tackle between Wilkin Formby and Elijah Pritchett. He said, I feel very confident in both those guys. They have both had good camps. So it'd be interesting to see who starts there. Look, I think they're probably going to play both, and may the best man win. Alabama's got a couple of tune-up games here to start the year. Kalen DeBoer spoke with the media. He said, when you are prepared well, you're going to be confident. Said he does not get the pregame jitters when asked about it by some of the media. Also of note with Alabama, Nick Sheridan and Colin Hitchler will be the Alabama coaches in the booth to start the season. Sheridan, the OC, Colin Hitchler, the DB's coach. Kalen DeBoer also said Jaden Roberts and Jam Miller are expected to practice and play Saturday. There was some question about Jam Miller. And then defense coordinator Kane Womack asked about TJ Finley. He said when you face the guy multiple times, you get a sense of how he plays. It helps to have seen him before, how he makes progressions and reads in real time. So some interesting notes from the Alabama folks there talking about Western Kentucky. All right, over at LSU, Brian Kelly speaking with the media Monday and giving a couple of injury updates. Wide receiver Chris Hilton and offensive lineman Miles Frazier, both projected to be starters, but both have been dealing with injuries. Brian Kelly saying Monday, Miles Frazier should practice tomorrow for us, so that's why we've got him listed as probable. Chris Hilton will move around today with our trainers. We'll get a better sense of his situation, but that's why he's listed as questionable, because we haven't seen him move around. Brian Kelly pointing to Tyree Adams and Paul Mubenga as guys who could fill in for Miles Frazier on the O-line. And at wide receiver, Brian Kelly saying Kyle Parker will be the next guy up in that situation. He's had a great camp, and we feel really good about what he could do for us. Now, Kyle Parker, friend of the show, was on Locked On SEC a few weeks ago, so we wish Kyle Parker the best of luck. But obviously it would be a big void. Chris Hilton expected to be a big body, deep target for LSU if he can't go this week against USC. If this thing turns into a score fest, that could be a big loss for LSU. All right, over at Kentucky, they are going to begin the season without a notable name on their offensive line. Offensive tackle Cortland Ford is among the Wildcats who will miss an extended period of time. 6'6", 327 pounds. He's an Illinois native, transferred to Kentucky after spending his first couple of seasons at USC. He's made 33 appearances with 14 career starts. Played in all 13 games for the Wildcats last year. Made starts at right tackle against Eastern Kentucky in the regular season, against Clemson in the Gator Bowl. Mark Stoops did say he likes his offensive line groups, that he feels like they are improving there, and the additions of Gerald Mincey and Jalen Farmer have really helped them. Kentucky will open the season at home against Southern Miss on Saturday. Over at Oklahoma, they will kick off their season against Temple this Friday night. The Sooners making some roster moves on Monday. Multiple reports coming out that former New Mexico defensive lineman David Rowe was added to the roster on Monday, and tight end Josh Faneuil was removed from the roster. Now, the expectation is Rowe will be a walk-on. Spent 2 years with the Lobos. Didn't see any action, and listed at 6'4", 310 pounds. Big D lineman there. But Dejon Terry, Dominic Williams, Caden Woolard, those are all guys they have there on the defensive line there at Oklahoma. Over at Tennessee, they are getting ready for the home opener with Nico Iamaleava taking on Chattanooga, making just his second career start, but the first one at home at Neyland Stadium. And Josh Heupel was asked if he's talked to Nico about his first home start, what his emotions will be like. He said he told the reporter he hadn't talked to him about that, but conveyed that he would just tell him just to soak it all in, enjoy the moment leading up to kickoff. He said for every quarterback, not just young ones, guys around him really have to play at a high level. Execution is important. That could be your O-line, your pass protection, being efficient in the run game, staying out of third and longs. All of that goes into a quarterback producing. One other note over at Tennessee, safety Andre Turrentine said that the sophomore cornerback Jermod McCoy transferred in this offseason from Oregon State, said he's making plays I haven't seen from anyone at that position since I've been here. So good news there on Jermod McCoy. And lastly, over at Texas A&M, Notre Dame putting out their depth chart ahead of their Week 1 game against Texas A&M. And an interesting move. They are going to start true freshman offensive tackle Anthony Knapp as well as sophomore Sam Pendleton. Now, Bruce Feldman pointing out Notre Dame is set to start 3 sophomores and 2 freshmen on their O-line in this season opener at Texas A&M. I don't know if you guys have looked at A&M's defensive line, but they're big, bad, and scary. Nick Scorton, the big defensive end coming in from Purdue this offseason, and then the 2 Shamars with Shamar Stewart and Shamar Turner, 2 big-time players there on that D-line. Good luck to Notre Dame's offensive line with all the young kids in there. But that will certainly be a matchup to watch in Saturday night's game in College Station. Mike Elko talking to the media said it's interesting and weird and not really something that I want to do in facing his former quarterback Riley Leonard, who will now be the quarterback at Notre Dame. Of course, he coached him at Duke. A few other A&M notes. Torian York talked about Texas A&M's open competition at the other linebacker spot. He said, all those guys have their strengths. They can all play next to me. I'm interested to see who we start on Saturday. I know that all 3 guys at that position are ready to go. And Mike Elko said, Reuben Owens is our only big injury. A couple of kids with nicks and bruises, but nothing that's holding them back. So a successful camp for A&M as they come out healthy, ready to go. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to give you my preseason ranks from the SEC and then our predicted order of finish. You do not want to miss it. I'm sure you'll hate it. We'll talk about it next right here on Locked On SEC. But first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. And look, 5 Hour Energy, when you watch sports, you want to grab a 5 Hour Energy shot to stay alert, to watch all your favorite games, or you stayed up late to see that intense overtime game, take a 5 Hour Energy shot in the morning so you can start your day. With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, it is the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There is a flavor for everyone. You could try them all on the site. You can even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and they will deliver it right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That is going to give you 20% off your order. That offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today and get started with 5 Hour Energy. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. And, of course, college football is back, and the Locked On College Football podcast kicking off all the action, doing season previews with the ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, and SEC. Be sure to check all those specials out streaming on Locked On College Football's 24/7 YouTube channel or on Amazon Fire TV, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, before we get into our predicted order of finish, and I did a lot of work here. We did a lot of research with wins and losses, and we made sure it all mapped out and matched up mathematically. So let's first dive into our preseason rankings. So this is where we got teams starting the season, and not a ton not crazy here where we got these teams ranked. This won't differ from many of the coaches' polls and all that kind of stuff that people put out. But we've got Georgia sitting at number 1 at the top of the SEC. Went back and forth on several other teams. I'm putting Texas in as my preseason number 2 team. Of course, I was down there in New Orleans in the playoff, got to see them nearly pull off the upset comeback of Washington. They did not get it done. But Texas, with Quinn Ewers back and the rest of the crew, I've got Texas at 2. I've got Alabama at 3 in the SEC with Jalen Milroe. I think he'll take a big step forward with this new offensive-minded coaching staff. I think they're going to get the most out of him. Questions about Bama's secondary and defense, we'll see that as we go. But I like Alabama at 3. Ole Miss, I've got at 4. I would have had Ole Miss number 2 on this list had they brought back Quinshon Judkins. I said that all offseason. I like Ole Miss a lot. I think this team's super talented. I just felt like had they brought back Quinshon Judkins, they would have been hands down a top 2 team in the conference preseason, but it is what it is. Missouri, I've got at number 5. Of course, can't deny what they did coming off of last season. Bring back Brady Cook, bring back Luther Burden. Got to figure out the run game, but a lot of good pieces back in Mizzou. I've got LSU at 6. Garrett Nussmeier, big questions with that defense. Can they improve? But I've got LSU at 6. I went back and forth. Could have had Tennessee 5 or 6. A lot of people very high on Nico Iamaleava. We'll see what he does. But we've got LSU 6. I've got Tennessee 7. I've got Oklahoma 8. They're right in that mix, this hodgepodge of teams in the middle that have a floor of 6 and 6, but a ceiling of 10 and 2, right? If all goes well and Jackson Arnold's awesome, which he very well could be, then Oklahoma will be higher. They'll finish the season ranked higher than this. I've got A&M at 9. They are obviously a team that has addressed a lot of needs through the transfer portal. Had Mike Elko come in and not really done much with the roster, they would have been lower than this. But they brought in a lot of new pieces, and I like what they've done. We've got Auburn at 10. Auburn could be a team that, if Peyton Thorne takes a step forward this year with Hugh Freeze calling the plays, Auburn's going to be a team that's going to finish very strong. I've got Kentucky at number 11. Some unknowns there with Brock Vandegrift, the new running backs. What do they look like? But I like the receivers. I like, Dane Key and all the pieces they have there. Offensive line, I think, is going to be solid. So got Kentucky at 11. Florida at 12. I'm a little bit higher on folks than other folks on Florida. I like Graham Mertz a lot. Montrell Johnson. If Florida can stay healthy, that's the key. I think they're going to be a lot better than that preseason 12 ranking. And then on the back end, I've got Arkansas at 13. I am high on Taylor Green. I do like the Bobby Petrino hire, so a chance for Arkansas certainly to finish ahead of this. South Carolina at 14. It's just, working in the new quarterback. What is Lenore Sellers? Is the defense improved? Offensive and defensive line, how improved are they? 15, Mississippi State, they're the huge wild card in all this. I feel like Mississippi State's going to pull off an upset of somebody they're not going to beat. That we're not expecting to beat this year. We'll find out as the season gets along. And then, of course, no surprise, Vanderbilt at number 16. But Diego Pavia, can he turn some heads there? So those are our SEC rankings. It's Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss in your top 4. Then I got Missouri, LSU, Tennessee, Oklahoma in the next 4. A&M, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida in the next 4. And then Arkansas, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Vandy on the back end. Again, it's my predictions. A lot of people have similar ones. Take it for what it is. We in the media, we get a lot of stuff wrong. So just putting that out there. All right, here we go. It is now time for the moment of truth. This is hours and hours of research and looking at rosters and trying to figure out matchups and, where would be a good time for a key upset. Where's the team coming off a bye week? Are they well rested? Are they hyped up for this game? Were they overlooking somebody for the next week's big game? Put all that stuff into an assessment here as we made our season predictions on how this year will play out. And let me just say with full discretion, even I felt stupid in how these turned out. I went back and looked. I looked at the records. I'm like, this isn't right. And I was going to scrap it. I was going to tear it up and throw it all up. And I said, no. I went in with no preconceived notions. And I said, this is – I just listed win or loss next to every game for every team. And this is how it plays out. Your predicted order finish in 2024 in the SEC. I've got the Georgia Bulldogs at the top at 11-1. I've got the Ole Miss Rebels also right up there at 11-1. I've got Georgia's lone loss at Ole Miss. I've got Ole Miss's lone loss at LSU. So I guess technically this would be flipped. If Ole Miss has the head-to-head to win over Georgia. So, again, as I went through it, I looked at Georgia's schedule. I think they're going to beat Clemson this weekend. I think they're going to win at Kentucky. I think they're going to win at Alabama. I just think Kirby is going to put so much into avenging that loss. Nick Saban's gone. He cannot start 0-1 against Kalen DeBoer in the Kalen DeBoer era. I think he's going to put everything he has into that game. I think they're going to beat Auburn. I think they're going to put everything they have into beating it at Texas as well. I think they're going to handle Florida. I think that game on November 9th at Ole Miss is a really, really tough one. I think the Rebels in that fan base are going to get up for it. On the flip side, Ole Miss, their lone loss, I've got at LSU, and it's a place they haven't won since 2008. I feel like that's the tough spot for Ole Miss. But I feel like the Rebels have a chance to win all the rest of their games. Home against Oklahoma, at Arkansas, and then, of course, that big one, home against Georgia. So that would mean Georgia and Ole Miss are going to Atlanta to play for the SEC Championship. Ole Miss has never been there. Lane Kiffin doing something he's never done there in Oxford. He's taking the Rebels to Atlanta. On the outside looking in, I've got the Tennessee Vols at 10-2. I ran through it. The two losses I gave them, I have them losing the SEC opener at Oklahoma, and I have them losing at Georgia late in the year. I have them winning everything else, including a game against Alabama in Knoxville. Behind them, I've got Texas. It's a big logjam of a ton of 9-3 teams overall. Right off the top, I've got Texas and Alabama right there at 9-3. I've got Missouri, LSU, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M all 9-3. I've got Auburn at 8-4. I've got Kentucky and Florida at 7-5. How about Florida at 7-5? I've got Arkansas and South Carolina at 4-8. Again, I wanted both those records to be better for those two teams. I got Mississippi State and Vanderbilt both at 3-9. And that's just kind of how it shook out. So there you have it. That's our predicted order finish. Again, I don't like it, but if this plays out this way, basically you're all but saying, let's just say for hypothetical sake, Georgia avenges their one loss, and that's to Ole Miss in Atlanta. That would put the Georgia Bulldogs as the SEC champ at 12-1. They would make the playoff as an automatic top 4 seed. Ole Miss at 11-2, very likely to get an at-large bid into the playoffs. So that's 2 SEC teams. I think Tennessee, in this scenario, they're 10-2. They get in as an at-large team. The big question will be, will the playoff committee put in a 9-3 SEC team as well? I think in this scenario, maybe the SEC only gets 3 teams in. Now the question is, what did the rest of the conferences do? If the ACC's only got one double-digit, win champ at the Big Ten, maybe the Big Ten gets 3-4 teams in. That'll be fascinating to see. But, it's funny. Our buddy Chris Marler, who does Locked on South Carolina, he brought up the other day that what if Alabama goes 9-3 in Kalen DeBoer's first year? A lot of Alabama fans will be irate. But what if they go on 9-3 and make the playoff? And then, and do some damage. What if they make a run? What if they win it all? Bama fans will go from being so irate and upset and angry with Kalen DeBoer to suddenly, oh, this is the right guy for the job and we love him. And the rest of the country would be so pissed, right? I mean, for Alabama to get in over an undefeated Florida State into the 14 playoff last year, wouldn't it make sense for Alabama to be the first 3-loss team to make the playoff and make a run in this 12-team playoff iteration? So, again, I hate it. If you guys hate it as well, I get it. I'm just telling you, objectively, I ran through the schedule and I picked wins and losses, and I found spots of where's a good right picking for an upset. I liked, I have LSU losing to USC this weekend. I have LSU losing at A&M. I've got Oklahoma beating Texas this year, but losing to Alabama, losing to Ole Miss. So again, it's I try to be objective. That's what we got. We'll check back. We'll certainly circle back in December and we'll revisit this and we'll see how wrong we were. But that's what we got for our predicted order finish. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Hopefully you stick with us, and hopefully you haven't shut off this podcast or video and said, what a complete, absolute moron. We'll touch on more of our predictions coming up next right here on Locked On SEC. First, want to remind you guys about our friends over at the Ultimate Football Head Coach gaming app. If you haven't checked it out yet, it is an amazing game and simulation. You get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to victory. Can you imagine being the actual head coach of Texas or Alabama? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. And here's what we really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, you will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads. It is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want, when you want to. And, of course, special offer for our Locked On SEC fans. Use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's all caps inside the game store. Once you get signed up and you got your coach picked and your team picked and all that, inside the game, you put that code locked on CFB, it's going to give you a free boost to your program. So make sure to take advantage of that perk, and it'll get your team off to a strong start. Download the gaming app. It's super easy. Just go to a website, visit ultimate-cfb.com. Ultimate-cfb.com. That'll take you straight to the App Store. Download Ultimate College Football Head Coach today and begin your coaching legacy. All right, going along here, Locked On SEC. One more kind of prediction, preview kind of thing we wanted to get into. Was asked by our buddy Zach Blackerby from Locked On Auburn. He said, hey, it might be cool for you to kind of like run through every SEC team and make a prediction on what you think, what's the best position group for each SEC team, just kind of unbiased. And look, I was going to do this. I was going to text each of our Locked On hosts and go, hey, what do you think is the strongest position group on your team this year? And granted, I would get a very honest and probably very accurate answer. I thought this would be more fun, me as an outsider. I keep up with the SEC. I follow all the teams, but I'm not, in that locker room or whatever, or on that practice field watching the team every day, or, all 16 teams. So I thought it would be better for me to come up with my, in my opinion, best position groups for each SEC team. So as we dive into it, best position groups at every SEC school. For Alabama, I went with linebacker. Look, Alabama's super talented in a bunch of different spots, but I just kept coming back to looking at that linebacking core, and it's Deontay Lawson and Jihad Campbell, and I just feel like at the end of the year, those two guys are going to lead this team in tackles, and I think they're going to be a big part why this defense is going to be better than I think some people are giving them credit for. Granted, the secondary's got to get better, but I think when I look at Alabama, the one group that I just say, I know I'm getting from those guys, it's the linebacker spot. For Arkansas, I'm going with the tight ends. I think they've got a couple different spots. I like the running back room with Jaquindon Jackson, Rashad Dubinion, and the rest of those guys, but I want tight end because Luke Haas, I think, before he got hurt last year, I think he was primed for a monster year. And I know Caden Breescorn's getting a lot of the love over at Ole Miss, but had he stayed healthy all year, I think he would have been a stud. And then they go and add, Varquise Gums as a number 2. They got Ty Washington. I just love that tight end room for Arkansas. So I want Arkansas tight end group. Auburn, kind of easy here because, ask anybody. What's Auburn's strength this year? It's going to be the run game, and it's going to be the running back. Jarquez Hunter, I think we all expect is going to be a top 5 rusher in the SEC this year. Damari Alston's a nice compliment. Jeremiah Cobb behind him. I just like the running back room at Auburn, and they've got to be good. Look, Peyton Thorne's got to be good, but to me, it starts and ends with Jarquez Hunter and that running back room. Over at Florida, went through a couple different positions, could have went a couple different ways. I just think at the end of the day, I like the linebacker room with Shamar James and Grayson Howard, Derek Wingo, Miles Graham. I feel like that's going to be maybe the strength of the Florida team. I could be wrong, but just really think that that's going to be the group that leads this team to a better record than people think. People are expecting Florida to not even make a bowl game this year. I like the linebacker core. Over at Georgia, again, could have went a lot of different ways. Could have went quarterback room. Could have said wide receiver. Could have said, really any pick. But come on, the D-line with Michael Williams, Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, Xavier McLeod. They're just they're super loaded there. Georgia's super loaded in every group, but it just felt like to me the defensive line is the one group you got to go with. At Kentucky, best position group, I went with linebacker, and maybe a little unfair, I'm going to include, like J.J. Weaver, De'Aaron Jackson, Jamin Dumas-Johnson. I just think that's a really good linebacker core. Include Alex Safari in that group. I get it. You probably say J.J. Weaver more, he's edge / outside linebacker, but I'm putting him in that group. I just think, De'Aaron Jackson we had on the SEC Media Days, but adding Jamin Dumas-Johnson, everybody you've talked to at Kentucky said what a big-time addition that is for them. At LSU, I think hands down, it's not even a debate. Their best position group is the offensive line. Will Campbell and Emory Jones, both studs at left and right tackle, both expected or projected to be first-round picks next year, with DJ Chester, Miles Frazier, and Garrett Dellinger. That's a group that it's going to be the strength. If LSU has a monster year like a lot of people are thinking they will have, it's because they're able to protect Garrett Nussmeier and they're able to run the ball at will, and the offensive line is a big reason. Mississippi State almost went wide receiver here. I do like all the additions they made with all the transfer portal guys at wide receiver, but I went with linebacker, John Lewis, J.P. Purvis. You add Stone Blanton through the portal from South Carolina. I just like that group from Mississippi State at linebacker. Over at Missouri, got to go wide receiver with Theo Weiss, Mookie Cooper, Luther Burden, Marquise Johnson. They add Courtney Crutchfield, James Madison. I mean, it's a deep group. You got to go with wide receiver when it starts and ends with wide receiver over at Missouri. Same thing over at Oklahoma. I know they've had an injury there, but I still think Oklahoma, one of the better wide receiver cores in the SEC. Deion Burks, the transfer who lit it up in the spring. Nick Anderson, friend of the show, was awesome as a freshman last year. J.J. Hester, Farouk, Thompson, all those guys. Oklahoma, definitely a strength on the defensive line, or rather at wide receiver. Speaking of defensive line, Ole Miss, what's their best group? I went with defensive line, could have went with a number of different places, but you add Walter Nolan with Princely Monmielen, with J.J. Pegues, with Jared Ivey. Ole Miss, they're going to be monsters on that defensive line. Pete Golding, he is playing with a loaded deck there. So excited to see what that Ole Miss offensive line or defensive line does as this year rolls along. For South Carolina, went back and forth on this one. I almost went D-line because I like Alex Huntley, Tonka Hemingway, adding Dylan Stewart, the freshman, but I went defensive back because South Carolina just always has good DBs. And I was reading a couple articles on Nick Emanwari, DQ Smith. Some people think Jalen Kilgore's set for a big year, O'Donnell Fortune. I like the secondary of South Carolina. I'm going to roll with the odds and say that they end up having a pretty good secondary, and that is a strength of the team. If it's not, well, they're in for a rough year. At Tennessee, again, I like the backfield. I love Dylan Sampson. I like the O-line, but I went with the wide receiver. This might be the most talented wide receiver room on paper that Tennessee has had in a long time. Brew McCoy's back, Squirrel White, Dante Thornton, Chris Brazzell comes over from Tulane. They add Mike Matthews, the freshman, Chaz Nimrod. I mean, that's a loaded wide receiver room for Tennessee. So had to go with that. Over at Texas A&M, I went with their defensive line. I just raved about them and what they're going to do to that young Notre Dame offensive line this weekend. But Nick Scorton, Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, DJ Hicks, I just got to love the defensive line at Texas A&M. Over at Texas, I went kind of simple here. Again, was running up and down Texas's depth chart. But at the end of the day, I went with the quarterbacks. Quinn Ewers, stud, and then, come on. You have a Manning in your quarterback room, Arch Manning. We're going to go with quarterback as best position group at Texas. Lastly, at Vanderbilt, I struggled with this one because they don't have a ton. I almost went quarterback with Diego Pavia and Nate Johnson, but I went O-line. You got Gunnar Hansen at the left tackle. You got Chase Mitchell at right tackle. I'm thinking if Vanderbilt's going to win a game this year in the SEC, they're going to have to play good on the O-line. So playing some odds, they're saying Vanderbilt's best position group will be O-line. And there you have it. Those are some of our predictions as we get you guys ready. Our official prediction show for the start of the SEC football season. Let us know in the comments what we got right, what we got wrong, what you hated, what you loved. And one more time, without further ado, our predicted order of finish. We got Georgia and Ole Miss in Atlanta. We got Tennessee in the playoff. And then likely one of Texas or Alabama getting in as well as a 9-3 team. But got a lot of 9-3 teams there. You think it's just this logjam of, like, any other year, 9-3, you would throw a parade. But, like, this year, if this happens in this predicted order of finish, like, 9-3 gets you to the Citrus Bowl, right? Like, there are a lot of good teams to choose from for some of those, the Music City Bowl and some of those middle-tier SEC bowl games. All right, that's going to do it for me, Chris Gordy. Appreciate you guys for listening and making us your first listen every day. I'll be back tomorrow. We got plenty of shows. We're going to get into our buddy Chris Marlowe is going to join us. We'll start looking ahead at games this weekend. John Talty is going to join us to talk about his new book. So we got a ton to go here this week on Locked On SEC. Make sure you're subscribed and check us out each and every day.